Money Radio, thank you for joining us today. We're talking with Laura Bramnick from TalkRealEstateAZ.com. TalkRealEstateAZ.com. And Laura, of course, is an attorney specializing in real estate, also a real estate agent. A tremendous combination there.
Can be helpful.
You can actually represent a client as an attorney and also as their real estate agent.
Correct.
Sometimes it doesn't cost any more to do it that way.
Sometimes it doesn't. So call and find out, and if I can figure out a way to do it, I will.
And sometimes that's really a good idea because things can sometimes get tricky in real estate.
Yes, they can.
Yes, they can, and it's better to cut it off at the pass,
Yeah.
prepare.
I hear about the problems after the fact.
Right.
So in my world, we see lots of problems.
Unfortunately. Laura is licensed through the State Bar of Arizona, specializing in real estate, also an Arizona real estate license. She's also a certified instructor with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. Phone number 480-624-2705 if you have a question or an issue.
Yes.
Or you want to buy a house or sell a house.
Exactly.
480-624-2705. I said house, it could be commercial as well.
It can be, or land.
Yeah, okay. We were talking last week, Laura, about lease purchase and also lease option. And we covered some of this territory, but there's more that we need to dig into.
Yeah, the main issue that I see is that the lease purchase agreement is drafted into one document, and I do not recommend that. That can create a lot of unanticipated problems.
So make the lease separate from the purchase.
Right. The lease should be separate from the purchase or separate from the option. And so the reason for that is that if a lease purchase is one document, then both the landlord and the tenant, the landlord being the owner, the tenant being the buyer, they lose their rights under the Arizona Residential Landlord Tenant Act. Because the act, if the sales agreement is in the lease, the act does not apply. And so if you're a landlord who has a tenant that doesn't pay and you want to evict them, you rely on the Landlord Tenant Act to do that because it gets you into court in as quick as 10 days.
Okay.
If you're a tenant and your landlord's not repairing certain things or is trying to kick you out earlier than your lease allows, let's say they're trying to sell the house, you have certain rights under the Landlord Tenant Act. So it really benefits both sides. And all you really need to do is not only to draft two different documents, but they can actually refer to each other. They can say a breach of one is a breach of the other. And so they can acknowledge that they both exist, but they have to be two separate contracts that come under two separate areas of the law.
And those rights for both the landlord and the tenant are quite important.
They're very important, and you just want to make clear that the lease is one thing and then the purchase is another. Now you can have lease payments go toward the purchase price, that's fine. You can do an option agreement. The biggest issue when you exercise your right to purchase, whether it's under the purchase contract or the option, is that you have to give the owner proper notice. If you miss the deadline or if you tell them verbally and the notice has to be in writing, which in real estate contracts it does, or if you do it by certified mail and it's supposed to be done by overnight mail, all those things can affect your rights under the contract. But the Arizona courts have actually ruled on this. It's all gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court does grant some relief to a buyer who has, let's say, made a reasonable inadvertent error in giving the notice.
Okay.
So if they have a large amount of damages, meaning if they would lose a lot of money that they already invested, and if they can prove that their mistake does not unduly prejudice their landlord owner, then the courts, in most circumstances, will grant them relief. But you don't want to have to file a lawsuit in order to assert your rights to purchase a property that you've been counting on buying and working toward buying.
And I know in the past, I've seen situations where these agreements are basically just kind of drawn up
Yeah,
very loosely, in part because you've got people trying to sell a property on their own
right,
without using professional assistance.
right,
Either a realtor or an attorney in your case.
exactly.
And things can get sloppy.
Yes, and the other thing that's come into play is that there's a federal law now called the Dodd-Frank Act.
Right.
And these types of contracts, you want to know if they come under that law, and if so, that law is very specific about what you can and cannot do, what the terms have to be, those types of things. And so it's more complicated than it's ever been.
And if you're not aware of those requirements, can it invalidate a contract?
The penalties under Dodd-Frank are huge. They're tens of thousands and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you don't want to mess around with that law.
Okay.
The other thing is that if you're a landlord that's trying to evict your tenant and they have a lease purchase agreement that you can't evict them under the Landlord-Tenant Act, means you have to file a lawsuit, which could take 12 to 18 months to get resolved. And the tenant's going to be living there rent-free the whole time.
There's some real issues people
That
need to be
you
aware
don't
of.
want to take that chance.
Well, as I say, I've seen in the past where people kind of throw together one of these lease purchase agreements, and the downside seems as if it is much more severe than the cost of doing it right in the first place.
And that's absolutely true. You really want to make sure that you cover all the issues, and if you are not a lawyer who's experienced with drafting these, you don't really know what all the issues are. And, the internet is not the best place to get these documents. Only because
Right.
you just don't know. There are some valid documents on the internet, but
But-
you have no idea if they are appropriate for your situation and if they're really going to protect you.
Okay. Good information, Laura. If you have questions about lease purchase or lease option, if you have questions about landlord-tenant relationships and issues, you work on that, as well as HOA, as well as buy and sell agreements, residential, commercial, land. You cover it all.
Yeah, I try to cover most of it, and if it's something I don't cover, I don't hesitate to refer a client to somebody who does.
But it's so important to get it right, as you say, that the downside can be significant if you get it wrong.
Yes, it can.
Ounce prevention, pound a cure.
We say that every week.
Laura Bramnick, talkrealestateaz.com. That's the website for more info. 480-624-2705. 480-624-2705. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Sinclair.